You're listening to Releasing Trauma, a survivor's podcast. And now here's your host, Tracy Osborne. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Today, we are going to be talking about childhood abuse and domestic violence, Stockholm Syndrome, and, how to go through it and overcome it. With me today is Melinda Kunst, and she is a survivor of childhood abuse and domestic violence, as well as PTSD, Stockholm Syndrome, and all the stuff that comes along with it. So, Melinda, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And I wish I could say that, I had some glitter and sparkles in there, but it sounds so grim. And it's such a difficult part of me to talk about. It's a heavy subject. I mean, honestly, it really is.
It is an incredibly heavy subject. And, it is hard to talk about, but it's so important for people like you and I to get out there and talk about and share our stories so that others know that they're not alone, that there's help and there's hope.
Yes, exactly. And that's how I started doing this. Well, actually, I started doing this just because I started having people reach out to me, and as I was sharing my own story, and I kind of ran away from it because I was like, Lord, I talk to God a lot. Like, Lord, I am such a mess right now. How can I give counsel and so on? And he's like, wait a minute. It's not about you. It's about me. But also, you just need to listen. You just need to hold space. You just need to listen. So that's how I eventually surrendered and jumped into this.
Well, let's kind of go back to the beginning. And can you give us kind of the Cliff Notes version of your story?
Oh, sure. Well, I grew up with trauma. I grew up in an abusive situation. I didn't know there was a name to it. I just thought this was normal. That was my normal growing up. And I had no idea that this was something not ordinary. So when my mom did leave my childhood abuser. And then we went and she married somebody else entirely different, threw me for a loop. I was a teenager and became a little rebellious. That was such an abnormal relationship. So when those nice guys started gravitating towards me, I just kind of pushed them away. Oh, you're like my brother. You just seem too nice. I was always waiting for someone to kind of yell at me or something like that. And it just seemed weird. So I did catch the eye of a young man who later became my husband, but he was exactly like my stepdad was. He was, the verbal abuse and so on. And again, I didn't know what the name to it was. I didn't know what it was, that label, but it was comforting. I don't know. And it sounds weird, but it was something I was used to. So I did marry him. I didn't want to, but there was a lot of saying that he was going to kill my family. He was going to kill me. He was going to kill himself if I didn't marry him. And I believed him only because I had seen what he did to people and experienced myself if you didn't do what he asked you to do or told you to do. So I saw firsthand that he's a big bully, but he was true to his word. If he was going to hurt you, he would hurt you. So even in high school, it wasn't uncommon for him to get angry at somebody and hang him out the window. Literally pick somebody up and hang him out the window. So he just was always a bully, always been that way. And I finally, after many years, I had met him when I was 17, but after many years of finally realizing this can't be it. This cannot be normal. I wanted what my other friends, my adult friends had. They had hand holding. They seemed picturesque, almost like the Norman Rockwell type of family. And I wanted that. And I know it's like, okay, God, I know there has to be something else. This can't be normal. There's got to be something else. So I eventually did leave. I actually left him 3 times. The third time for the last time, but I left him the first time in 2007. And then the final time in 2009. And each time I went to leave him physically, there was still the same, I'm going to hurt you. By that time we had kids. We had 3 littles. So by that time he was saying, I'm going to kill the kids and so on and so on. But I had to plan. I did have to plan my escape.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad I didn't go back. There were many times I thought, well, maybe I'll just go back because, again, we're in that comfort level. That's what I knew. I knew I could go ahead and kind of pussyfoot around him, de-escalate things and situations. So, but if I hadn't left, things were becoming apparent that I was not going to survive that year if I hadn't left when I did. So that's in a nutshell. That's it.
So, I've heard, I didn't have, the kind of childhood abuse that many people have. Mine was more emotional and verbal, but, I've read and heard so many stories of kids who growing up in violent homes, and they don't know any different.
Right.
And they go over to their friends' houses and they're like, this isn't how normal people live,
Exactly.
or right. It clues them in that, okay, my life isn't how normal people live. But yeah, you kind of don't know any better. And as far as growing up and then getting into a relationship, that's exactly what you've known and it being comfortable. Mm-hmm. It sounds weird if you've never been there.
Exactly.
But if you've been there, it's that comfort zone. It's that uncomfortable comfort zone. We know what to expect. We know what's going to happen. We know, we've got to learn the triggers and how to de-escalate and dodge the punches and,
Exactly.
we learn all that. And so getting into a normal, healthy relationship, that's what feels weird.
Scary.
And uncomfortable and terrifying.
Yes.
Yeah. When my fiance and I first got together, he had been in a 5-year abusive relationship, very emotionally abusive. And it took probably almost that first year for him to stop walking on eggshells, thinking, is she going to freak out? What's going to happen? Oh. He'd never been in a normal, healthy relationship. And I had to learn what his triggers were so that, when we communicate or when I do things, I am not doing something that may be normal for me, but would trigger him. Right. So it's really difficult going from these abusive relationships into a healthy relationship. It's just...
And, I'm glad that you mentioned that, though, because many a times we do jump into another relationship with another hurt person, mm-hmm. with somebody that's either an abuser or maybe they've been victimized themselves. We just jump into that again, unknowingly. A lot of times, sometimes there's red flags. We just don't recognize them. Again, if you don't know what you know until you know it. Right. Yeah. So, you just don't. If that was your normal, then that's not a red flag for you. It's normal. So I'm glad you mentioned that. When I jumped into this relationship after I left my ex, I call my new husband. I'm remarried, by the way. We do have a son together. He's 11. Well, yes, he married me twice. So when we married, you made me forget my train of thought. And now when we did when we married,
pipe down in the background.
Yeah, be quiet back there. Play your game. When we married, when we got together, I should say, he didn't recognize, he didn't know exactly what I was going through. Mm-hmm. He thought, typical thing. He said, she said, it can't be that bad. Until he started actually conversing with him, he realized the level of what I had been putting up with. I don't want to say crazy, but yeah, it was crazy. He recognized, wait a minute, this isn't right. This isn't a normal breakup. This is definitely something that he didn't know. His mom and dad was the typical Ozzie and Harriet kind of mom and dad, Brady Bunch kind of people. But they liked their martinis. And so he was used to that. They had fights and so on, but it wasn't anything that was a fisticuffs he never hurt his wife, anything like that, or there wasn't the verbal abuse like that. So for him to be paired with me, it was a learning dance for both of us. It really was, because he had to learn a lot of my triggers and so on. And it's still learning, because even though I'm almost 13, I'm almost 13. I'm celebrating my 13-year survival anniversary on the 25th of this month of February. And
Awesome.
even this long, even though it's been such a long period of time, I'm still triggered by different things. I just shared a memory with him a few days ago. And so, I mean, it's something I'd like to think that I'm at least 96% free from being challenged with PTSD. But there's still things there. There's still things that I work on a daily.
Mm-hmm. And they'll always be there.
Yes.
It's almost like, like the alcoholic or the drug addict. It's one day at a time. And
exactly.
And it's always there. We've just learned how to cope with it. We learn how to deal with it. We learn these coping skills for different things. We learn what our triggers are and how to communicate them. And, so it's a, I don't think you're ever 100% healed.
No,
you might get to like 99%, but there's always that underlying,
right.
that underlying, you never know,
right.
Something might pop up.
Right. And I still jump when somebody like raises their voice. I don't like confrontation. So if there's somebody that's really argumentative, I automatically back down. I do. And it's something I still deal with there. Loud sounds still scare me. I still like night lights in my house, even around my yard. I've got solar lights all over. I don't like being in the dark. And that's one of my triggers. And I know this, but also just to say, if you don't recognize that you're even a victim, is amazing, because I do talk with women. I do coach women. Many of them are referrals from a friend of a friend or a family member, and they don't even recognize that they're a victim. This is, again, ordinary. So them learning, okay, this is a trigger. Well, what do you mean what's a trigger? What it is you're doing, this living this way. And even the verbiage, we're talking about trauma. We're talking about victimization today. I didn't know I was a victim. I had no idea what domestic violence looked like, except from what Hollywood shares. Farrah Fawcett back in the 70s and 80s.
Burning bed.
Yes, sister. Yes. I picture that, and even flash forward to the 90s where it's J-Lo, or the 2000s J-Lo, and enough. That to me was, oh my gosh, that's so terrible and bad. But I didn't recognize, even in my own self, in my own skin, that I was a victim. And I had no idea, even through childhood. I had no idea. So to be armed and learned this was mind-blowing for me. And even for the psychologist to tell me, you have PTSD, you have Stockholm syndrome. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. What? What are you talking about?
PTSD? I wasn't kidnapped. What are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't kidnapped. PTSD. I'm not in the service, military. I'm not a firefighter or policeman. What are you talking about? So that was really eye-opening for me to figure that out. Now, I did stay in my very first time, actually twice, I stayed at a local women's shelter, St. Jude House in Crown Point. I'm from Indiana. And I stayed there. They did give me pamphlets. They give that education and so on, their support groups. But when you're going through that period of time, and I don't mean to laugh, but I can just think of myself back then. I was a hot mess. I was crying. I did not want to hear anybody tell me. They just give me papers. They're talking to me, and it sounds like they're talking at me. And I almost felt like it was my fault. But it wasn't. And I was not ready to read any of their paperwork. But later on, afterwards, it hit me like a ton of bricks. It's like, yeah, this is exactly what I'm going through. This cycle, if they want to call it a cycle. I don't think there ever is a cycle. It seems like you're always waiting for that, as you mentioned, other shoe to drop. You're always waiting for that. There was never like this air quote honeymoon period, because it was always there. I never knew 1 minute from the next if his mood was going to change. And that even went back to my childhood. I didn't know. I had no idea what I'm going to say out of my mouth. Oh, dinner's going to be late. Is that going to get me a smack face? Is that going to get me, I dropped something. Is that going to get me some verbiage coming out of his mouth that I'm stupid or an idiot or something like that? So you just don't know. So again, you don't know what you don't know until you know it. Yeah,
absolutely. And even then, when you're living with people like this, you never know.
Right.
1 minute you could drop something and he'll say, here, let me pick that up for you. And the next minute you could drop something and he's like, you're a freaking moron. What? Exactly. You got butter on your hands? What? You can't hold on to anything?
Right.
You never know what is going to set them off. No. A couple things that you mentioned, I definitely want to highlight. Number one, you talked about going to a shelter, and the shelters are wonderful. They are so well-meaning, but you're right. They inundate you with pamphlets and all of this stuff. And the last thing you want to do is sit down and read.
Yes.
You're in heightened survival mode at the moment. You're terrified. You've just left your abuser. What if they come find me? Are they going to be, are they going to kill me? Are they going to kill everybody here? What's going to happen? What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do with my kids? There's so much that's going on in our heads. The last thing we want to do is sit down and read a freaking pamphlet,
Exactly.
So they're definitely well-meaning.
Yes.
But, excuse me. And they're a great safe zone to get out and get to. But the other thing that you mentioned was you created a safety plan.
Yes.
And that is so crucial.
Yes.
Because, depending on the level of violence that you're dealing with, it's not easy to walk away from many of these abusers. No. And I don't want to say men because it's women too.
Women too. Yes.
But so, getting that safety plan put in place, where am I going to go? Right. Who can I trust to help me?
Exactly.
What am I going to do about the kids or the pets or the, this, that, and the other? What am I going to do for money? Because so many of them financially control us.
Right.
So
right.
What kind of things were on your safety plan?
Well, when I initially went to the shelter, they did provide me with a safety plan, but that kind of, again, it fell on deaf ears. You're almost walking around like in a fog and in a daze. Again, being hypervigilant, wondering, looking around in your shoulder, is someone following me and so on. But afterwards, that final time in 2009, when I did leave back, actually in October, November of 2008, I recognized I really needed to get something in order. I really needed to get going. So then I kind of sprang into action with my trusted family. And I talked to them. I reached out and said, okay, I got to leave. I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know how, but I need your help. And so just putting my pride down, I didn't want to go back to a shelter. Not that was anything wrong with it, that I did have issues or anything like that, but I just felt like I needed to do this on my own. So I reached out to them. I started sneaking things, kids' games. I started copying paperwork, important paperwork, bills, and so on, or checkbook information, anything I can think of, medication. I went ahead and I would copy it and send it off with my dad, who lived really close. He would come and pick up little carloads of different things. It was usually stuff mainly for the kids, and things that I didn't recognize or didn't realize, he would think it was gone. And the funny thing is, during that period of time, I wasn't taking any of our clothes. I left all of our clothes. I was taking small things that, were tucked in the corner that he wouldn't even think to say, hey, that's gone. But throughout that period of time, I must have been given off some kind of signals, because he kept insisting that clothes were missing. He's like, you're going to be leaving me soon because their kids' clothes are gone, or you're missing this. And really and truly, I did not take any clothes, but there was something there that he thought I was taking clothes. It was very bizarre, very scary though, because any kind of argument with him was usually an interrogation. They would go on for hours and hours, and until I would relent. Oh yes, I love you, or hey, I didn't mean to see that. No, I didn't take any clothes, or whatever it was. So it was never just easy, open, shut. And going back to the relationship, when you get into a new relationship with somebody, and hopefully they're just normal, and not, maybe they don't have any trauma, or you can work on it together. Learning how to argue and fight, healthy boundaries, that sort of thing is so important. With our first argument with Mr. Awesome, I thought I was waiting for him to punch me. And I think I even egged him on at one point in time, like, go on, just hit me. I know you want to. And he's like, woman, just settle down. Why would I want to hit you?
Like
We're just arguing about XYZ, and it's not worth it. Why? And him trying to wrap his mind around it, and me just being in that hyper arousal, that state, all the chemicals in my brain just going off, and waiting waiting just to have to defend myself, and I didn't have to. So learning how to do that, learning, you mentioned about healing, recognizing that you are a victim. I don't even like to say victim, but that you
survivor.
are a
Once
survivor.
you're out,
Yes,
you're a survivor.
you are a survivor, that you need to start doing some self-care and self-love. Don't just fall into it and just walk away thinking, okay, everything's going to be rainbows and unicorns. No, you do need to do some self-love, some self-care work too, in order to break those patterns, those negative and unhealthy patterns that you had.
Yeah, because, when we're in those situations, the stuff that they tell us repeatedly,
yes,
we start to believe it.
Right.
We believe we're no good. We believe we have no self-worth. Or no value. We believe that they're the only ones who could ever possibly love us. We believe that garbage. And we take that with us into our new life. Right. So we definitely, there's a lot of work there where you have to reprogram your brain.
Right. Right. And just recognizing that that's like the first step, that I really need to work on myself. I need to do this. And I don't want to be this person anymore. I don't want to be that. I don't want to go into my next relationship or find another person like him. It's funny you mentioned those things. Oh, no one will ever love you like I did. And I'm thinking to myself now, thank goodness. Thank goodness.
You'll never find anyone like me.
Yes.
I'm not looking. Thank God.
Yes. Well, back to that safety plan that you mentioned too, reaching out to the kids' school. I had to reach out to them about a month before and let them know what was going on. And they saw patterns. The kids' behavior was definitely not the best. They were always in and out of trouble, detention and so on. And so there was trouble in school. They knew something was going on. They just couldn't pinpoint it. So when I opened up about that, they were like, you know what, anything you need, any help or so on, let us know if you have an order of protection, so on and so on. But I did transfer them out. We moved somewhere else, but I let them know ahead of time. I also let my, I didn't have work, but I worked with my then husband's family at an antique shop. So I let my vendors know, this is what's going to happen. And they're used to it. They saw what was going on. They knew things were kind of tumultuous. Sure. So, but I told them, I'm done. I'm not coming back. I'm not doing this anymore. So they knew. I told his mom. I told his boss, like a few days before, I'm leaving. I'm done. So I told all of them, I trusted them not to say anything. And they didn't. Thank goodness. Otherwise, it would be a different story right now. And I waited for him to leave. I had to wait until he's construction. He still is. So I had to wait for him to leave for work. He was laid off during the wintertime, so I couldn't leave until I could find that right opportunity just to go. And sure enough, it was on Ash Wednesday back in 2009. And I kind of thought that was very fortuitous. Like, oh my goodness, I didn't recognize it at the time, but I left. My heart was pounding. He left early in the morning, about 5 a.m, 5:30. As soon as he was gone, I hit the door. I was throwing things in there I probably couldn't do now. Futon that went in my van. Just things like I had this
adrenaline.
Yes, exactly. I had this strength that just came over me. I'm just popping things in the car. I didn't even know what it was. Didn't even care. Just started throwing things in there. Yes. And I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm waiting for him to come back home. Maybe he forgot something. So it was very scary. But making those plans, making sure I had that paperwork was so important. Important numbers, phone book. I copied over numbers that I might need as well. And again, I gave that to somebody that I trusted. I opened up a P.O. box. I had that going to another address, my sister's address. I had a checking account, which I did go and created a new email address, which I didn't use on our computer at home. I used it elsewhere. So if I needed to do that,
so smart.
It took me a long time. I was trying to rack my brain with everything I can think of in order to do that. Made sure I had the kids' medication in advance. I let the doctor know what was going on. Just letting other people know. And I almost needed to. I scrounged up. It took me forever. It took me probably about 6 months, 8 months in order to open up that checking account because he had such a tight rein on our finances. Anytime I found a quarter, a penny, I would tuck that away until I opened up that checking account. It took me $25 to open it. I was so proud of myself. And again, I had the statements come to the email address. So then there was no paper trail there. So he wouldn't know. And again, I didn't check that email at home. I made sure I checked it somewhere else if I needed to.
Right.
So just to have that, I bought myself a track phone. We were with a Verizon or somebody back then.
Yeah. So you get a burner
Nextel.
phone.
Yeah. So I got a burner phone. And so it was low, 25 or $30 a month. I could afford that. I had to find a job. I had these kids, we didn't have insurance. We're walking away from all of that. We're walking away with the car and so on. But I did give that back to him and got a used car instead. But it was starting from scratch, but it felt so good. It was scary. It still was very scary those first couple months. Well, and actually the first couple years, but it felt so good. It felt so good to be able to make my own decisions, to buy whatever the hell I wanted to. If I wanted to buy a box of cereal, chocolatey cereal, I did. And I could eat that at 11 o'clock at night. If I wanted to polish my nails at 2 a.m, I could polish my nails. It was nice to finally feel like I actually had some control. It really was, after so many years of not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But that sense of freedom doesn't happen as soon as you walk out the door.
No,
it still takes some time,
Oh, yes.
because you're still, you're still in, fear mode. So you're
right.
Constantly every bump in noise in your new place. It's like,
oh yeah,
is that him? Is that him?
Yeah.
So
yes.
you did so many smart things, and I want to just highlight those for our listeners. You made copies of all the important documents, but you did not keep them in the house. And that is so important, because you don't want those found. Every penny, every quarter, just those little tiny things that won't be missed, you save. Having the email addresses, you don't use it, your computer, definitely all that kind of stuff. If you want to do research on safety planning and how to leave, if you can do it from another computer, definitely do it from another computer, so that they don't check the browser history. And you can clear the browser history, but there's still ways for them to figure it out.
Exactly. And saying
programs,
that, there's one thing I did miss. I missed that we had a Garmin in the van. In my van, I missed that. And my kids, also what I didn't think of, I planned for the best, as best I could, but I didn't plan for the breakdown that my children would have afterwards, because where I was having a tough time, these littles were having a tremendous time. They were 13, 11, and 10. So they were also a hot mess. They didn't know what to do with this as well. So there was still some more major acting out. There was a lot of suicide attempts. There was cutting. My girls are cutters. My eldest girl, who's 25, she's not anymore. But my 22-year-old, she's still a cutter. So these are things I didn't think of. But when I was at the hospital with one of my kids, my ex was visiting at the same time, and I did have a police escort. They did escort me around, because there were some death threats, even after I left. So he went into my van and grabbed, and I couldn't see what he was doing. I was on the top floor in the hospital, second floor. I could see him in my van rummaging around, and sure enough, he took off with the Garmin. I didn't recognize that until like a week or two later. I'm like, what the heck is missing? I couldn't figure it out. He had to take a couple other little things, but that was gone. And he ended up finding my now husband Terry's house, and he would stalk him. So it's something I didn't think about. So ladies or gentlemen, please be mindful of those tracking devices on your car.
They have Garmin, those Apple AirTags now.
Yes.
Definitely watch for those. Check in your wheel wells.
Yes.
Those are real common places for them to put trackers.
Right. Or even if your kids there's children between yourselves, check their laptops, their computers, their phones. They might have that set up as well.
Location trackers.
When you're on social media, you might have to go quiet. You might have to go dark and not share those pictures that you're going to Disney. Don't share that stuff. Don't share that you have a new boyfriend or girlfriend. Don't do that. Don't poke the bear. Just try to get a little quiet. Make sure you look out for who you trust in your circle, because there's people that might be on his or her side that you think that they've got your back. Sometimes they might not. They might end up spying, right, and turning against you and spreading lies and so on, or those good church people too. So just be mindful of that.
Yep. And, and especially when you're getting ready to leave, you want to keep that knowledge circle small, very small. So, well, Melinda, thank you so much. This has been, I want to say wonderful, but it's been so informative.
Thank you.
And I know that there's listeners out there who this is really going to help. So I really thank you for coming on and sharing your story and, just having that courage to talk with us about what happened and how you got out. And I love the fact that you are doing so well now.
Oh, thank you. Yes. So there is hope for anybody that's out there. There is. You yourself too. Yeah, there is hope. So don't give up. Don't give up.
Now, real quick before we end, you do have a book, Call Me Master. Tell us a little bit about that. I do have a book. And actually, if anybody's like a PDF of that, it's my childhood. I don't get really graphic in it, but I just sprinkle in what happened in my childhood and then my teenage years, as well as being married and then finally leaving. And there's some self-help, self-love. I'm a self-love addict. So there is a lot of sprinkling of that. Also, what I talked about today about getting that paperwork and so on in order, but I'm giving away PDFs of that for free. If anybody's interested, they can always contact me on social media or good.
Yeah.
And all, listeners, I will have all of that information in the show notes. Just head over to releasingtraumapodcast.com and pull up Melinda's episode. All her contact information and everything will be there for you. So, Melinda, thank you again for coming on. Listeners, thank you as always for tuning in. If you're listening from one of our platforms, Apple, iHeart, Google, whatever it is, make sure you give us a like and a subscribe and all that good stuff. And we'll talk to you in the next show. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure you hit subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss a show. Be sure to check us out on our new socials on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.